All right, everybody, Neil Hiscox with Canadian Auto Dealer here for another chat with Chuck Seguin. Chuck, what I thought we could talk about this week is, we're now a month into the impact of the pandemic on the industry. We talk a lot about dealers, but the reality is there's not just one dealer situation out there, and I thought we could look at it from a couple of different ways. There are some dealers and dealer groups out there that are well capitalized. They have a cushion of capital underneath them that can help them ride through what's an incredibly disruptive time and even look for opportunity in that time. There's going to be a bunch of dealers out there that don't have the benefit of that cushion underneath them, for whom this is a very different scenario. And I thought if you could sort of speak to those two different camps, and really what each of them face, and if you were talking to somebody in each camp, how you would be recommending they spend their day.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having me again. Well, my first recommendation in both camps would be for them to wake up in the morning and get out of bed, and get to work. These are very stressful times for dealers. I think the CADA survey that came out this week, 96% of dealerships have laid off staff, and 70 odd percent more than 10 people. So dealers, by and large, live by their people and the relationship with their people. And this is really, really, really weighing heavily and really hard on dealerships of all size, regardless of whether they're well capitalized or not. Those that are not well capitalized obviously have short-term cash concerns that they have to deal with. And what's happening out there is some of them are closed completely and have just shut down to the bare nuts, as we talked about in the last episode that we did. Only spending what absolutely has to be spent, deferring as much as possible, trying to convert all their inventory into cash to take that frozen capital that they have in their business and turn it into some form of liquidity. Take advantage of the government programs, although they're a little bit slow to come. And one of the concerns I have for the poorly capitalized dealers is, do they have enough bandwidth to get through until the subsidies start coming through and the cash starts coming in? Once that happens, life should begin to get a little bit better. But the reality is that the deferrals are deferrals. So rent deferrals, expense deferrals, and things like that have to be paid at some point. So it's not a question that they're getting off the hook. It's a question that they're building up liabilities, and those liabilities are going to have to be paid. So there's going to be some longer term pain before there's short term gain down the road. For those that are well capitalized, they still have hunkered down in different provinces. Not all of their operations can be open. Most of them are operating with one or two service bays, minimal staff. Some are adding as the business begins to come along. But they have a slightly different situation in that they can weather a short-term downturn, and that's what savings accounts and cash accounts and that sort of stuff are for. And if you're lucky enough to have that, then you can withstand a little bit more of the downturn. But the downturn is significant. It's really, really harsh. April is gonna be a very ugly month on top of a really ugly month in March. April is going to be really bad. There's not an awful lot of volume that's going on the vehicle side, and services. Some of them are fairly robust, but again, the challenges are there with the added costs of trying to cope with COVID-19 and the procedures and that sort of stuff, and really trying to figure out whether they're going to hire back their employees, which I think most dealers probably will do, to take advantage of the wage subsidy and begin to rebuild. And then those who are really well capitalized are really focusing on what are the opportunities for the future? They can afford to have a couple of extra people around to talk about, how do I update my online strategy and my online capability? What do I need to do? How am I going to perform afterwards? What's my new normal going to look like? And many dealers are looking to that. But make no mistake, every dealer across the country is feeling pain. Most employees are feeling pain. And it's not a pretty sight out there.
Talking about the gap between, let's look at the wage subsidy as one example, because I think that is probably the source of government funding that everyone has their eye on the most in terms of being able to help businesses stay open and stay viable. But you're right. I mean, that money hasn't started flowing yet, and I know we've seen it ourselves. We're hearing from a lot of other people that the application process is so clogged up to actually even get yourself eligible for it. I mean, the CRA portals are just overwhelmed. No one's exactly sure when those first checks are going to arrive. If you don't have a lot of capital underneath you, what are some of your options to actually bridge until that money comes, even though that bridging may need to only be 3 or 4 weeks?
Well, hopefully you've got a friendly banker. Unfortunately, most dealerships probably would not qualify for the $40,000 interest-free loan, even with the newly revised caps. Their payrolls are just too big. Savings accounts, family, friends, you get right down to the bare bones. You may have to have some payments that you have to make. You try to defer as much as you possibly can, and knowing that at the end of the day, there is some light at the end of the tunnel. You're just not quite sure when that's going to arrive. But with the retroactive effect of the 75% wage subsidy back to March 15th, when that money starts flowing, there should be a reasonable amount of cash flow that starts to come in, provided that dealers have called back their employees and put them back on their payroll. And that's one advantage, well capitalized versus not capitalized. If I'm poorly capitalized, I don't have a lot of cash. I don't have the wherewithal to bring people back off unemployment. I'm not going to tell them to forego their unemployment check when I might not be able to pay them for a month or 6 weeks until I get the 75% wage subsidy. So there's a real tussle there in the stores, and not necessarily smaller stores, but the stores that are not quite as well capitalized as they could be. And that's advantage to the capitalized, because they can afford to bring them back. They can afford to pay, say, the 75% starting now, knowing full well that that's going to be a receivable for them, and they're going to get that money back in a very short period of time. So there is a mixed bag, but if you're in financial difficulty, you're in financial difficulty, and you're going to try to pull out all the stops to make ends meet. And it's not easy. That's very, very, very painful and very difficult on a lot of people.
Is there a part of this conversation that is dealerships that own their real estate versus those that don't? Certainly, if you own your real estate and there's some equity there, it gives you another place you can turn.
Yeah, the real estate piece is interesting, because a lot of dealers, as you know, own their real estate through holding companies. They set the rents, they can move it down, but then they have mortgages on the other side to make those obligations. And to the extent that the bank has deferred some of those payments, that eases the cash burden. If you're leasing your property from a non-related third party, many of those probably have taken the position that they're going to reduce rents for a period of time. They're probably not going to reduce the taxes portion, the TMI as they call it, but they may very well reduce the rent portion for a period of time. But it's merely a deferral. You're going to have to pay the piper again. So maybe starting in September, October, your payments will actually go up, so that in the 12-month period, the landlord is made whole. So short term, there are ways to move things off. bit of an advantage to those that own. But if you lease, the landlords probably are coming to the table in some way, shape, or form. The other area of concern are the dealers that have done acquisitions that have played goodwill and borrowed the money for that goodwill. So you've got some pretty big acquisitions that have gone on. Some of the happiest guys on the planet are dealers that have sold in the last year or two right now, looking at this saying, boy, I'm glad I'm not in this business anymore. But those liabilities still continue, those debts still continue, and the underlying security for those loans really is the value of the underlying business. And if the value of the underlying business and cash flow gets impacted in the short term, you'll see banks cooperate, but in the longer term, that's going to have to come back to support these loans. So I'm keeping my eye on that to see what the impact is going to be, because as you know, in a goodwill type loan, that's an intangible, and there's the only security that's there is the other hard asset security within the group to purchase. So and some dealership groups have an awful lot of goodwill on their balance sheet and an awful lot of debt associated with that. So that's something to keep track of.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what it does in terms of being a cautionary tale for the mid and long term in terms of the appetite to continuing to acquire, and for some of the guys, as you referenced, that were busy acquiring, and really this wall has hit them at a pretty opportune time if they're able to keep those things they've assembled together.
Yeah, it's a challenge. So you may be big and successful, but you may still have some of the same problems that the undercapitalized dealers have, the same financial pressures. And dealers are trying to sell vehicles online, but they're running into hurdles to getting documents signed. Where can they be signed? A lot of those rules in the provinces go against COVID-19 best practice. So there's some real struggles out there in the marketplace right now. But the message, I guess, today is try to keep the frustration down. Do as best you can. If you start opening gradually. Only add expenses that make sense, that are going to provide to the revenue. If you can't open, try to defer as much as you possibly can. But this is going to go on for a while. We're going to be at this for several weeks yet, maybe a couple of months. But even after we come out of this thing on the other end, it's going to look very different. The uptake is going to be very, very slow. The economy is going to be started in different bits and pieces, and we're starting to hear some of that now. But the businesses where there is a potential for social contact will be the last to open up. And so there's going to be pressures on consumers. There's going to be pressures on businesses going for the next 6, 8, 10, 12 months that are going to last, and the impact of we've gone through could be felt for the next couple of years. So it's not going to be a fast turnaround to bump back to normal. And it's dealerships are really going to have to watch their nickels and dimes, manage their payrolls properly, look after their people properly, look after their customers properly. And we'll all get through this in the end, but there's going to be still lots of pain to go.
Well, look, let's wind it up for now on that point. I think lots to think about, but a good discussion. I really appreciate it. As always, stay safe, take care, and I look forward to the next one.
Same to you and Kelly.
All right, take care. This is Neil Hiscox signing off.